Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. Riker, we have a little Victor Oladipo to the Raptors trade update because obviously he's been a big name linked to the Toronto Raptors for the past month now since those initial reports came out that he was looking to leave the Pacers. The Raptors, amongst a lot of teams, were interested in picking him up, but there's been a lot of updates surrounding him and his situation in Indiana right now and lots of stuff, and I'm just going to throw it all out there. He's come out and said he's expecting a max contract going into, because he has 1 year left on his current deal, but a max contract next offseason. And even though there's been back and forth, different reports about whether he actually wants out or not, there's an official report that came out recently the past couple days that's saying the Pacers are going to explore trades for Victor Oladipo, and that makes sense considering his injury history and wanting a max contract. But Riker, there's been a lot of teams floating out around, and do you think with all of the new updated reports, this makes it more likely Victor Oladipo is going to get traded to the Raptors?
I don't know, because if it makes it more, this is going to become the same argument potentially, depending on what teams are interested in Victor Oladipo, that you could make about Giannis. And I know that it's the farthest probable outcome that Giannis gets traded before he hits free agency. But I keep saying, if Milwaukee somehow becomes confident that he will not re-sign, then they might shop him as well. And if other teams get in the mix, maybe they'd have a more enticing package than what Toronto would be able to offer. And the same argument could be made for Victor Oladipo. And I'm looking at what package could the Raptors possibly make that doesn't include Fred VanVleet. And so we'll break that down a little bit, but ultimately, I think it brings it further away from the Raptors potentially landing Victor Oladipo, Ben.
Yeah, and see, it's interesting because with Giannis, every team in the NBA that if Giannis is on the trading block, they're all going to bring out the bag and bring out everything to get Giannis Antetokounmpo. In the live stream that we recorded the weekend, we brought up how Klay Thompson could be on the table from the Warriors and those top picks, but with the teams that have been rumored now, we're not really sure what Oladipo's market value is. And you brought up how we'd like to keep Fred, obviously, but I think a Fred VanVleet trade, and we made a whole video on that one, would be the optimal offer for the Pacers. The Pacers would potentially receive for Victor Oladipo. I don't see teams like the Heat or these different teams are going to lay out later in the podcast offering a better offer. The one rumored team that might have potentially a better deal is Victor Oladipo potentially going to the Timberwolves for the number one pick. The Timberwolves have said they're open to trading that top pick. Dipo has been rumored, but they said that they'd like the Pacers to give additional assets and stuff there, not just the number one overall pick. But outside of that one, which I don't really think is that realistic, I think the Raptors could put together the best potential offer for Dipo.
Well, I think that the number one pick is an extremely valuable thing to have, Ben, and especially with, I think, the potential in this draft class. Obviously, it doesn't bolster the same amount of highlights that past years might, but that top mix of players is promising. And if you look at what Minnesota is going to try to achieve now, given how much their franchise has struggled, it doesn't surprise me that they would want to put themselves in a more immediate win-now situation, which if you put the likes of D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns, and Victor Oladipo, sort of ran them all in tandem, that does make a much stronger team than if you brought in, even if the number one talent or the number one pick in the draft ends up, becoming great. But the only thing is, if they're not willing to trade those two guys, you're right. Does that make it enough that if the Raptors also put out a package that the Raptors would be, worse than them? I don't know, Ben. And that's what it comes down to. What would the Raptors be willing to trade? And that's what I'm going to ask you right now, because I think the last time that we spoke about it, we said the Raptors could offer something with Fred VanVleet. And in the immediate season, this upcoming season, the Raptors might improve. Come playoff time, they might be a little bit more solid. And even if the Raptors were able to re-sign Victor Oladipo, for the long term, it makes less sense to have Victor Oladipo than Fred VanVleet. And even though he offers better size, maybe a little bit better athleticism, he can attack the basket and finish around the rim better than Fred VanVleet can. He's not a natural point guard. And when Kyle Lowry inevitably shifts out of that one spot, is Victor Oladipo the point guard of the future that you want? Probably not. So is there a package, Ben, that we could offer that doesn't include Fred VanVleet?
Well, you brought one up on the podcast the weekend with Norman Powell and seemingly every bench player we have on this roster. So we could do like a package of an aggregate of players. Obviously, Norman Powell would be an enticing player, especially with his contract and his improvement for a team like Indiana that might be looking. I'm really not sure the direction of this Pacers team if they do end up moving on from Oladipo and if they'd want a win now player. I guess they would, considering they have Brogdon and Sabonis. I'm not sure what the deal is with Turner. That's another whole player that people want us to talk about potentially going to the Raptors. But I think a deal centered around Norman Powell and maybe one of the young guys. I know I'd hate to give up both Norm and TD just because they're both sort of explosive wings and do similar things. But maybe Norman Powell, a pick. We do have a couple. We do have all of our first-round picks in the future. That could be an offer we're looking to give. But I think we made the whole debate, and I think we both came to the conclusion that it wouldn't be the best move to trade Fred VanVleet in a sign and trade for Dipo, but that would for sure be the best value I think the Pacers are going to get, assuming the Timberwolves don't just give up a first-round pick. They want other pieces in return on top of Dipo in that potential rumored deal. I don't really see Minnesota really just giving the first pick for Victor Oladipo and that's it, because that's really strange considering the risk Oladipo plays, even though he's a high ceiling player. But yeah, I think a package surrounding Norm, a couple of our younger deep guys, and maybe a pick or something like that. I feel like that would get it done, Riker.
It could get it done. Ben, this is a couple thoughts that just popped into my head. Is you make a trade happen, you bring this guy in saying, all right, maybe or maybe not, we have a chance to re-sign him again. I don't know what his list is of top places that he'd look to sign in come free agency time. But let's just assume for a second that you'd have the ability to re-sign Victor Oladipo. He's already come out saying he's expecting to get a max contract. It's a year where you've already put Siakam. He's already locked into a max contract. Serge Ibaka's still probably going to get money for the next 2 years, we'd say. You're probably going to get Fred VanVleet on $20 million. You're probably going to try to look to sign Giannis Antetokounmpo to a max contract. At some point, you're just paying too many people too much money, Ben. Is Victor Oladipo the kind of guy that you'd give $30 million plus to?
That was another thing I also wanted to bring up, because he, as you said, that was the big report that surrounded this video. Dipo wants that max contract at the end of the year. It's probably why the Indiana Pacers are looking to move on from him, because not very many top-tier teams. Obviously, a guy like Oladipo is much more valuable to a team that doesn't really have any stars, doesn't really have that much upside, doesn't really have the opportunity to land a lot of stars. So maybe they'll be willing to throw the bag at a guy that they know they're overpaying for, but it's a high risk, high reward move for a team like the Kings or the Hornets or something like that. Right? I could see a team giving him big money for in the offseason of 2021 to, give him the bag and see what happens. But for a team that's contending and you want to sort of craft the optimal roster, maxing out a guy like Oladipo, who, as we've brought up, super injury prone, hasn't really played at a high level since 2018, right? Is that really the route you want to go? I personally, as of right now, I wouldn't give him a max contract. We'd have to see what would happen over the course of the season, regardless if he's on the Pacers or the Raptors, see how he performs. If he's healthy, if he's that guy we did see in 2018 where he's really clutch. I remember that was a factor about him, but shooting three, slashing, athletic, great defender, all these sorts of things, then I think you're more willing to take that risk and all that. But I don't know with all the injury history, Riker.
Okay, well, call me crazy, Ben, but if the Raptors were able to trade for Victor Oladipo without needing to include Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam in the trade situation that makes it all happen, I'd be willing to pull trigger on that. I'd basically be willing to trade anybody. OG would be real on the fence. I'd rather keep OG than not. But, like I said...
You trade OG for Dipo?
Like I said, I'd be on the fence about that. Call me crazy, but just let me roll with this idea here, Ben.
Okay, I'll let you roll.
So if you put up a package deal with Norman Powell, Terrence Davis, Matt Thomas, and whoever else needs to be in that to get it done, I'd be okay with that. You're gutting a lot of the bench unit, but maybe there's some other guys that you can bring up. But I trust in Masai. I trust in the development staff. I'm okay with it at that point because, again, you're not trading away the guy that's going to become your point guard of the future, right? You get to hold on to that asset piece. I would assume in that short term, in that next season, which is when, to me, it's most important to be the best team possible to lure Giannis in upcoming free agency, right? I think Victor Oladipo is a net positive. He'd bring in extra wins to the team, and he'd bring a little bit extra come playoff time. This is, again, assuming that there's a lot of buts in this case, in this scenario, but this is assuming he's able to perform to the level that he could 2 years ago. You have not traded away a good piece, critical pieces. You've brought this guy in that's making it a more attractive market for Giannis. I'd be fine to have him in that case because you don't need to pay him at that point. It's exactly what you said, Ben, but I think that's the real reason, because for Raptors, it's extremely low risk. If you don't want to give him $30 million, well, whatever, don't. If he needs to stick around to bring Giannis in, then, pay him and pay Giannis and make the rest work.
Yeah, but, you max out Oladipo, right? And you're leaning in favor of doing that, and maybe I'd be more willing to, if we don't have to trade for him, if we keep the bench well-rounded and those sorts of things, and just go for him in 2021 if Giannis doesn't work out. But if we're maxing out Fred, or not max him out, giving him around a $20 million deal, which is the rumored window of money he's going to be making, around 20 to 22 million, assuming we bring him back. Having Dipo ended up being maxed out on this roster. Having Pascal Siakam on his lucrative deal that he has. Serge Ibaka is going to have to get paid, Riker. Kyle Lowry's still going to have to make something. Even though he's an aging point guard, he's still a valuable piece and won't be paying the minimum. Then we have to extend OG Anunoby. And you brought up that you might be willing to trade OG Anunoby for Dipo. And I wouldn't even make that move straight up. Just because of age, just because of risk, just because of the level of defense that OG plays. Even if he doesn't improve from here, he is the perfect 3-and-D role player right now. And he still has a lot of room to grow. I can't even believe you're on the fence with putting in Dipo for this potential deal for Oladipo, putting in OG for a potential Dipo deal.
I am, Ben, because I don't think the Raptors are. I think it's unlikely the Raptors are going to win the championship next season. I don't think that's a hot take, and therefore, all the best that they can do is get as far as they can to make Giannis say, "This is the team that if I come in, This team is now championship ready." Right? It's not going to take extra pieces, nothing. I'm ready. And OG, for as good as he is, he's not adding wins to the team. He's keeping teams in games. Yeah, he had that buzzer beater, obviously. But if you bring in a guy like Oladipo, this is a guy that's going to score you go-ahead points. He's gonna be the person that starts a run or finishes a run. He's hitting those critical shots. He's a player, and again, I talked about in the last podcast how Andre Drummond's basically 17 and 15 stat line is an empty stat line because it's not really contributing to the outcome of the game. For Victor Oladipo, it's almost the opposite case. He can go on that scoring explosion in the fourth quarter when that's when you need buckets, and that's typically when the Raptors have struggled, or third quarter, whatever the situation may be, that they need points. And Victor Oladipo can be that guy. Right now, OG can't. So if I'm looking at short term, make this team the best possible so that Giannis will consider the Raptors as a place to sign in free agency. Yes, bringing in Victor Oladipo, I think, improves the team for one season. And then if you're not giving away Fred VanVleet, who I think you need to keep because he's going to be the point guard of the future, you're not trading away Pascal Siakam, then you're able to take that risk and not be locked in on a contract that could kill you in the future.
I see where you're coming from. And I agree, Dipo has a lot of value. But the more I think about it, the more I look at the cap situation, and he becomes less and less attractive for me. And I don't even know if the money situation wasn't even a factor that I'd want Oladipo on our team long term compared to OG. Because we don't know what's going to happen with OG. He's the perfect build for a guy that can just turn into a superstar. He could be that next sort. He could take a jump like Pascal Siakam has, or one of these players. And once he gets a handle, once he gets his just feel for the game, which he took a massive step forward with this year. Nick Nurse has came out and said he's looking to get OG more touches going into next season. Because clearly Oladipo's not the level of defender OG Anunoby is right now, and it's not even that close, right? Defensively, OG already has him miles ahead, but even though Dipo's athletic, he's not known as he's a good defender, and his size makes him a little bit better for VanVleet in terms of versatility, but OG is like the perfect build, perfect mobility for a defender. And the 3-point shooting that is there, the slap, I don't know, Riker.
Ben, this is okay. Let me say this. This will be my argument for the cap space situation, and I get what you're saying about OG too, but we don't know if he would be included. I would assume he's a desirable player for the Indiana Pacers, but let's just say they were willing to accept a trade, including Norman Powell, Terrence Davis, Matt Thomas, and Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, whoever else, whatever it takes to balance the trade. So basically, you've gutted the bench unit, but the Raptors, let's just say that they'll find a way to make it work. And would you have the ability to sign on a max deal Victor Oladipo? And the way I look at it is, Kyle Lowry, his contract is coming up for renewal in the same free agency that Giannis will be in and that Victor Oladipo will be in, correct?
Yep.
So basically, you're giving Victor Oladipo at this point Kyle Lowry's money. You're giving Fred VanVleet this season Marc Gasol's money because Marc Gasol was on a plus $20 million contract. So you're giving that money to Fred VanVleet. You have $10 million or more cleared up from getting rid of Norman Powell. Now you give that back to Serge Ibaka because we're hoping we don't extend him on another $20+ million contract for a long period of time. So hopefully you give that money to Serge Ibaka. And now Kyle Lowry should hopefully go down in value because I would say after 2 years, he's not going to be the point guard that's playing 40 minutes per game. I know you're super high on that, but I'm not. Maybe he all of a sudden shifts down to be a $10 million guy. And I think if it played out that way, you'd still have enough to put Giannis on a max.
I don't know. I'd have to look at that. That's a lot to take in right there. Just all the pieces that would have to come together. But I don't see us being able to keep Lowry, Fred, a maxed out Dipo, a maxed out Siakam, a maxed out, at least a Surge on some amount of money. OG Anunoby, who's also up for an extension at that time, right? That's OG's going to get paid as well. So regardless if he makes a wild jump or not. So maybe I'd be more attracted to Oladipo just in free agency, especially with everything that's gone on. So we have another year to see how it is, because right now that trade would just be a massive risk in itself, gutting your bench, gutting all your young guys in terms of Matt Thomas and Terrence Davis, even Norman Powell, who took a massive step forward last season. You're gutting that for a guy that might not be at that level and a guy that you don't even want to have around if he isn't playing at that level, and even if he's not. Even if he's fine, right? You don't want to max him out because that's the money he's going to expect, and that's the money some team is going to throw out there to him. So, I don't know, Riker. Even though I think we can, and this was sort of the point of this podcast, breaking down the report, I think it's possible for the Raptors to make this trade, and I think they can outbid rumored teams like the Timberwolves if they're not looking for crazy picks, Miami Heat, who I don't think would give up Bam or Jimmy or Tyler Hero in a deal like that. I think they can out-edge those sorts of teams, but I don't know if it's the move.
My verdict is I'd go for it. If I'm getting rid of people besides Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam, and you have the ability to re-sign this guy, and you're looking at a lineup of Fred VanVleet and Oladipo in the backcourt, then you have OG, Pascal and Giannis, if you can land Giannis, and Serge Ibaka coming off the bench at a mid-level contract, and hopefully at that point you're also able to offer Kyle Lowry a mid-level contract. I don't want to drop this bombshell, but he's old at that point too. Maybe he just walks at that point and goes to a different team. I don't know, but I'm looking at that potential lineup of Fred VanVleet, Oladipo, OG, Pascal, Giannis. You'd have 4 max contract players or close to in your starting lineup. But that's a healthy team, Ben. That's a perennial championship contending team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, honestly, any accumulation of Toronto Raptors roster with Giannis, and assuming we don't have to completely gut the team, will be a championship contending team. But I don't know. Let us know what you guys think. Would you guys what type of deal would you want to see an Oladipo trade happen? Would it just be Norman Powell? Would it be Fred? Would you be willing to throw OG in a deal like that? Let us know in the comment section below. You're the best to make this far. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. Riker, any last words on a potential Dipo trade?
That's it for me. Well, yeah. I mean, let's make it happen, Ben. Let's make it happen. But cheers.